These are my favorite and not so favorite metal albums of August 2025, starting with Blackbraid with Blackbraid III. The current darling, taking the black metal world by storm, is back with their second full length, and once more their sound very much recalls the melodic sounds of Dissection, but also with some riffs that at times remind me of Inquisition. And of course, their approach brings me a more naturalistic energy, complete with several acoustic sections, making for a nice complement to Walking Through the Woods. I do think that this one feels a bit overlong and a little less focused than the debut, but overall I enjoyed it, and that cover art is just gorgeous. Next up is Cruel Bomb with Cruel Bomb. After several split singles and EPs, this Pennsylvania thrash metal crew is finally dropping their first full-length album on the unsuspecting public. The timing feels like it couldn't be better, and they really are bringing war-themed destruction like a second coming of the 80s greats. I can tell that the band has grown quite a bit in the last 5 years since I covered them last, with plenty of attitude-drenched riffs and pissed-off vocals. And right down to another glorious album cover in a very different way. This is the full package, jumped right into my favorite thrash metal albums of the year, honestly. Then we have Unleashed with Fire Upon Your Lands.
In the aftermath of destruction, when all is said and done.
I've never really been a big enough fan of these guys to warrant digging through their entire discography for a tier list, but I've generally enjoyed their output, which goes all the way back to 1990. And somehow, all these years later, I feel like this album still manages to capture that same early Swedish death metal sound with their special Norse mythology twist and plenty of D-beat.
I dream of your death.
It took a few spins to peel back the layers, but there are a lot of great little earworm melodeath hooks that are such a hallmark of this era, on the likes of War Comes Again and Hold Your Hammers High. They're not reinventing the wheel, but they definitely aren't phoning it in either, which I think is generally a good sweet spot for a legacy death metal band like this to be in.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Next up is Malthusian with The Summoning Bell. Now, I had just been wondering what had become of this Irish blackened death metal band that initially floored me right from their first filthy demo in 2013. And now, as if summoned from the great depths, here they are, returned in full malignant force for their second full length, 7 years in the wake of their debut. Now, with the support of Relapse Records, these guys bring the atmosphere as dark and miserable as ever, mixing harrowing, echoing death growls, jangly blackened guitars, and alternations of slithering doom and fiery chaos reminiscent of Portal. Once more, quality always reigns over quantity in my book. These guys may only have 4 releases, but that only makes me more excited every time I hear their name. Next up is Harvested with Dysthymia. This little gem came absolutely out of nowhere for me and ended up completely knocking my socks off. The Denver crew just put out their first full length, and already they are giving some of Cannibal Corpse's best albums a run for their money. A great balance here of pure destructive violence with infectious grooves, and all captured excellently with some really solid production. Every track here slaps, there's not a single dud to be found. Then we have Grand Cadaver with The Rot Beneath. This Swedish death metal band, fronted by Dark Tranquillity's always busy Mikeal Stanne, following up their 2023 sophomore effort with a new EP. And unlike his more melodic work with the Halo Effect earlier this year, once more Grand Cadaver stands as an outlet for the more old-school Swedish sounds. This is more akin to the HM2 buzzsaw and D-beat of bands like Bloodbath and Dismember. And frankly, I think that these 4 tracks are better than anything off of the last full length. We also have Car Bomb with The Whisper Dreams. The triumphant return of one of my favorite modern-day mathcore acts, and while I'm sad that it's just a 3-song EP, I'm just glad to get something. It's been 6 years since they dropped Mordial, but they sound like they haven't skipped a beat. More unique fusions of Djenty, Meshuggah-esque madness, early Gojira, and drifting My Bloody Valentine influences, which guitarist Greg Kubacki has cited as one of his favorites right here on the channel. Next up is Imperishable with Swallowing the World. The second full length from this South Carolina blackened death metal band made up of members of Nile, Enthean, and now Derek Roddy of Hate Eternal and Malevolent Creation. Raw and rugged sounding stuff with the support of Everlasting Spew, making it all the more nasty sounding. Great mix of both styles here, kind of melding Morbid Angel with 90s, early 2000s era Behemoth, and the denser, noisier production also draws comparisons to Vitriol with some serious guitar shred. Next up is Incite with Savage New Times. The seventh album from this Arizona band formed in 2004, this time of the thrash and groove metal variety. It's been another somewhat slower year for this genre, but I'd list this among the few standouts I've come across so far with its venomous vocals and headbanging energy. Killer riffs and rhythms alike on songs like Feel This Shit and Just a Rat, and even when they slow things down for others like Doubts and The Fear, somehow it only sounds more rebellious. Then we have Baest with Colossal. Very interesting approach from this Denmark band whose name translates to Beast, now on their fourth full length. I'd actually describe their sound as more of like death and roll, also bringing some flavors of heavy metal and sludge along the way. They can be quite catchy too, with songs like Misfortunate Son and King of the Sun. Really fun riffing and ultimately a refreshing listen with a different approach after so much tech death this year. We also have Hexrot with Formless Ruin of Oblivion. Transcending Obscurity Records has really been pumping out some solid death metal this year, with this Massachusetts debut closing out another strong month for them. Presented as a seamless composition over 35 minutes and split into 7 tracks, this is quite the progressive experience. I hear notes of everything from Abyssal and Veilburner to Deathspell Omega and Krallice, the latter being especially notable as Colin Marston provides mastering. More than a touch of the avant-garde here to make for something a bit more off-kilter in a year packed with more streamlined, old-school death metal and, again, technical death metal. We also have King Yosef with Spire of Fear. Following up last month's Black Magnet with another similar melding of industrial metal with hardcore intensity, but with its own twists and turns. Funnily enough, Pelletier got his start as a hip-hop producer in the 2010s, only to find himself playing high-octane shows with the likes of Converge and Health. Speaking of which, I hear elements of the latter as well as Godflesh, Street Sex, and fellow collaborators Youth Code. Not to mention the album was mixed and engineered with Kurt Ballou at God City Studios. Then there's Plasmodulated with an ocean of putrid, stinky, vile, disgusting hell.
Yes, about that title.
The debut full-length from this Florida death metal band that is as Florida as they come, and courtesy of Warflutch's Mick Colby. Notably, guitars are up-tuned here to a traditional E tuning, harkening back to the days of the old-school classics. Another solid mix of more brutal and at times semi-technical flair with more ominous, doom-ridden moments. Seriously, our cup runneth over with no shortage of killer death metal of all shapes and sizes this year. Then we have Vindicator with Whispers of Death. The fifth album from these Ohio thrashers, celebrating their 20th year as a band, but sounding very much like it's still the 80s. Lots of gnarly, death-tinged screams, punctuated by some fun crossover gang vocals as well. And the guitar work, great stuff, including some amazing soloing alongside more rollicking D-beats. I realize that this is another fairly cookie-cutter description of the genre, but let the music speak for itself when it comes to being an exemplary version of that exact thing. Next up is Monolith with He Who Kills. Speaking of old school bands, this Australian death metal crew was formed all the way back in 1998, and yet this is only their second full-length record. I could probably draw some comparisons to the likes of Suffocation and Malevolent Creation with their dark atmosphere, brutal vocals, and penchant for technicality. Another case where this is the definition of meat and potatoes, but who doesn't like meat and potatoes anyways? The Metal Meltdown knows what I'm talking about. And with lyrics about seeing through the eyes of serial killers, expect the bloodlust to be at an all-time high. Switching things up, we have Halloween with Giants and Monsters. Another epic record from this power metal crew celebrating over 40 years as a band and once more with all three vocalists on full display. Some really impressive compositions here that at times I'd argue rival even Dream Theater in their grandeur. The vocals are as strong as ever, the guitar solo shred, and really, even as somebody who isn't much of a power metal guy, I definitely get caught up in it all. I know that a few of you have been asking me for a tier list, but considering that this is album 19, and there would undeniably even be some jokers with poor social cues complaining about missing EPs and whatnot.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
You'll just have to be satisfied with this shout out while I maintain my sanity. Next up is Defacement with Doomed. Quite a month for avant-garde and experimental death metal too, adding the fourth album from this multinational band to the list. Passages in this album remind me of everything from Alterage and, again, Abyssal to Imperial Triumphant and Blood Incantation. Dark flurries of technicality give way to surprisingly bright and shimmery notes of post-rock, shoegaze, and even some ambient interludes. Quite the spectrum of sound on display here, from harrowing violence to pure bliss. We also have Creature with Toujours Humain. I had no idea that this was the French band's fifth album since 2018, but man, this is some incredible progressive symphonic madness. The vocals actually trend on the death metal side of things, with some compositional elements that remind me at times of both Septic Flesh and Akerkok. But really, for all the similar touches, Creature has a unique sound that is 100% its own and may end up earning itself a spot on my end-of-year list, maybe? At bare minimum, it is definitely among the most engaging and memorable death black kind of metal mixture this year, alongside the likes of Imperial Triumphant. There's also Sallow Moth with Mossbane Lantern. Another really wild and unique sounding Eye Voidhanger death metal entry this month from this Texas solo project. It's the third full length brought to you by the prolific Gary Brentz, and very much channeling the oddball elements of once more Akerkok, but also Afterbirth and beyond. Just take a track like Aether Cave Boots that kicks off in a very dissident and technical direction with some of the most vile toilet gurgle vocals you can find, only to end like an evening in some upscale smooth jazz fine dining establishment. Guitar influences seem to run the gamut from Gorguts and Artificial Brain to Cynic, Death, and Carcass. We also have Melancholia with Random Access Misery. Quite the fusion of deathcore, metalcore, and new metal going on here with this Australian crew, only just formed 3 years ago and already making a name for themselves. This sophomore album takes the foundations they built with Hiss Through Rotten Teeth and ventures outward for something that feels a bit more ambitious. Like my favorite new metal albums back in the day, tracks like Spit are highly infectious, eerily atmospheric, and deliver on a wide variety of vocal sounds. It's like someone took the guitar grooves of Chimera and added vocals more in line with Shadow of Intent. We also have Panopticon with Songs of High Wraith. Panopticon really hasn't ever put out an album I truly disliked at this point, and this one continues the trend of putting me in a very introspective state. There are the usual alternations between lofty, drifting bliss, as with the White Mountain View, contrasted with violent explosions of black metal menace, as with Haunted America 2. That one in particular is easily one of their darkest, heaviest tracks to date. Very powerful and potent stuff, very much targeted at the present world we are living in and all of the anxieties that go with that. Hiraeth being a Welsh word that roughly translates to homesickness tinged with grief and sadness. Note that they also released Laurentian Blue the same week, but I've not been as keen on their acoustic stuff. I did not update the tier list video for this one, but I'd probably put the former at fantastic and the latter at okay, even though as just like a straight up folk album, it's really solid. Next up we have The Armed with The Future Is Here and Everything Needs to Be Destroyed. Another mad fusion of hardcore and hyperpop from this increasingly experimental crew. I'll admit that they push the limits even for me with previous album Perfect Saviors, but this one finds them returning to what I loved about 2021's ultra pop. Great balance of berating, challenging walls of artsy noise with genuinely infectious melody on tracks like Sharp Teeth and Local Millionaire. If Andy Warhol listened to hardcore music, this is probably what it would sound like. We also have Baby Metal with Metal Fourth. Another very fun and diverse album from this Japanese group now with more collabs than ever. From Poppy and Polyphia to Slaughter to Prevail and Bloodywood, it's a wild ride. I do think that the downside is that it ends up sounding more like a compilation, lacking some of its own personal identity as a result. But even so, I have fun with pretty much every track here, and that's all I really needed. We also have an album that almost made my top pick, with Signs of the Swarm, To Rid Myself of Truth. This album goes so hard. Like, I already loved Amongst the Low and Empty in 2023, but this sixth album from the Pittsburgh deathcore band is easily topping that one, I think. This thing is packed with back-to-back ragers with killer vocals, wildly infectious riffs, and some killer guest spots from Will Ramos, Phil Bozeman, Johnny Crowder of Prison, and Jack Murray of 156 Silence. Phil and Jack were my personal favorites on that front, with Iron Sacrament and Fear and Judgment, respectively, but again, there's not really a track here that I didn't favorite, and as punishing as the pure heavy sections are, they also demonstrate some incredible work with atmosphere on Forcing to Forget and Sarkazine. Alright, before we get to my favorite pick of the month, we have some honorable mentions. We have Hebephrenic with Decathexis. No idea if I'm pronouncing that right, but honestly, this Australian death metal band's debut could have also fit into the best list with more chaotic grinding machinery guitars and generally impressive energy, but there was just so much to cover this month and so many slots to fill. Give it a spin regardless. We also have Vormen with Band of Brothers. The seventh album from this Finnish melodic death metal crew, helmed by former Children of Bodom keyboardist John Varman, and as much as I enjoyed the previous record, I have more mixed thoughts on this one. Those synth parts are unmistakable if you've been missing that Children of Bodom sound, and there are solid riffs to be found, but the production and songwriting feel a bit lacking, and Petri's vocals, despite generally being a fan of his work with Ensifirum, just aren't quite cutting the mustard here for some reason. There's also Sadistic Force with Morbid Odyssey. Another solid blast of blackened speed metal from this Texas crew. I honestly don't think I could put it better than they did in the press release, saying, meant to be listened to on an 8-track in a 75 Camaro while passing a hash pipe and sipping beer from a pull tab can. For fans of Midnight, for sure. Then there's Panzerkreis with Maleficium Part 2. Album 10 from this Denmark blackened death metal band, concluding part 1 from just last year. More devilishly catchy, unbridled evil that makes for a nice dynamic mix of thrashy speed and slower, more atmospheric sections. I just didn't find much of it sticking with me this time. There's Castrator with Coronation of the Grotesque. The second album from this New York all-female death metal squad, they really bring the pain, mixing the blunt force brutality of Cannibal Corpse with some of the more menacing atmosphere of Immolation. There's also Barbarous with Initium Mors. The debut LP from this Oakland, California death metal crew, once more for fans of Gatecreeper and Necrot. I feel like I'll be asking a bit more from them next time around to keep me interested, but a strong enough start with some catchy moments for sure. We also have Tooh, or Tooh, with Po-Ovici Poznetje.
Damn you! You give him the easy ones!
The 7th album from this Czech progressive grindcore band formed in 1993. I've enjoyed some of their stuff and generally appreciate weird off-kilter things, but I'm just not sure I see myself going back to this for repeated re-listens in comparison to something like Psy. We also have Prayer Group with Strawberry. A little more noise for you on my growing list from this Richmond act. Great sense of attitude and figure it out as we go along kind of sensibility that even the band confirms was a part of this album. There's also Thorn with Nebulous Womb of Eternity. Some truly despicable death doom out of Arizona from this solo project on its 4th full length since starting in 2020. You all know it takes quite a bit for anything doom in its tags to grab my attention, but this definitely got me with its sewage-like aesthetic. Then there's Chevelle with Brightest Blasphemy. Not really a full-on metal album, but kind of straddling the line, and a band I've enjoyed most albums from since the Wonder What's Next days. Not one of their best records, but I'd put it somewhere in the upper half. You can check out the tier list for more thoughts on this one. There's also Sea Mosquito with Majestas. Another very atmospheric album from this UK black metal band. I didn't find myself as entranced as with the last one, but there are some great songs like In Reverence of Pain. To the Grave put out Still. I found myself a bit disappointed with this Deathcore crew's previous EP after loving the full lengths, but I feel like this one has them back on track with some really sick grooves and intense vocals. Also Menegarm with Edsvuren. The 12th album from this Swedish folk metal crew, and it's pretty damn solid. Everything I like about the genre is on display. Again, in a less packed month, this may have even made the list, especially as a longtime enjoyer going back to personal favorite Doldsvard. And then In Mourning with The Immortal. Now, it's been a minute since I thought of this Swedish melodic death metal band that have been around since 2000, but particularly caught my ear with 2016's Afterglow. Back then, I compared them quite a bit to Opeth, but these days it seems they're a little bit more in line with Amorphous and Catatonia. Not my favorite, but enjoyable. Alright, I do have 2 worst picks for the month this month, the first of which is Fit for a King with Lonely God. The 8th album from this metalcore band has its moments. I dig the title track for one, but man, is this just packed with all of the things that I hate most about the more modern sentiment of the genre right now. Really mopey, corny, overproduced, clean vocals, super generic lyrics, and even the heavier parts just feel kind of copy-paste. You can do way worse, but for my ears, this is just more octane-core slop. We have Architects at Home in a time where the comparison isn't really a compliment anymore. And then double those notes for Attack Attack with Attack Attack 2.
I'm a one-hit wonder, running the game.
Regular viewers, you know me. I'm the metalcore guy. I'm the metalcore defender, but not this trash. Like, double the notes I had. These guys have gone from the kings of crabcore to absolute slop. Just pure trash. I don't think I even made it all the way through this thing. But, yeah, it's not good.
Endless trash!
Alright, before I finally unveil my favorite album of the month, but some people may already be guessing what it is. But just remember, hit the like button if you've been enjoying the video, and also comment below your own favorite metal albums of this month. There's just so much to pick through, and so I'm intrigued to hear what you all have. I'm sure there are even things that I didn't get to, but I'm but one mere mortal. But my favorite metal album of August goes to Deftones with Private Music. Look, it's rare that a Deftones album doesn't make my list, but it's been a while since one was worthy of the top spot and actually makes me question if it's one of their best. But man, they really pulled out all the stops for this one, and everyone is bringing their A game here, from the riffs and atmospheric additions to what may very well be the best front-to-back performance of Chino's career. And much like White Pony, even though it's a very different album from that, there is a lot of diversity on display while still feeling like a very cohesive whole. Incredible stuff, and it's just so cool to see how this band has managed to stay relevant now going on, 30 years. My first listen to this, I literally spun it at least 5 times in a row. Alright y'all, that is a lot. Check out this playlist for more of my favorite metal albums by month, or this for your personal YouTube recommendation. You can also check out tier lists for a lot of the bands that I mentioned, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.